the skies over Germany. The arrival of the Mustang, March 6, 1944. 25,000 feet above Berlin, the sky was a battlefield of vapor and steel. The Luftwaffe still ruled the central German airspace, and Allied pilots, limited by range, knew that flying deep into the heart of the Reich was almost suicidal. Until that day, below, the industrial chimneys of Leipzig and Magdeburg spewed thick columns of smoke that rose into the clouds, marks of Germany's relentless war effort. And above, cutting through the icy air, came a new shape, sleek, fast, gleaming under the winter sun. The North American P-51 Mustang. Across German radio frequencies, the alert echoed between bases. Attention! Enemy aircraft detected. Not bombers. Fighters. They're coming from very far away. Luftwaffe pilots were baffled. Enemy fighters over Berlin. Impossible. No American aircraft had the range to cross France, reach Germany, and still fight, not without refueling. And yet, there they were, the Mustangs, slender, powerful, and silent, flying alongside formations of B-17, Flying Fortresses, and B-24 Liberators. Lieutenant Clarence Bud Anderson of the 357th Fighter Group adjusted his reflector sight and scanned the horizon. The deep growl of his Packard-built Merlin V1650 engine purred like a satisfied predator. "Never thought I'd make it this far without touching the ground," he muttered. Below, a German patrol of Messerschmitt Bauer 109s climbed to intercept. At the front, the seasoned Oberleutnant Hans Eckerhard Bob, an ace with more than 50 victories, stared at his radar and couldn't believe the readings. "They can't be here. Their fighters don't fly this far." Within seconds, the silence of the sky was shattered. The Mustangs dove with breathtaking speed, their propellers roaring like thunder. The Germans were caught off guard, not only by their presence, but by their sheer power. The Mustang was unlike anything they had faced before. Fast, stable, and capable of turning the tide of battle in midair. As the Messerschmitts tried to maneuver, the Americans were already upon them. Bud Anderson rolled into a dive behind an enemy, squeezed the trigger, and his 50 caliber guns spat fire. The Bf-109 exploded into a spiral of black smoke. "That one's not making it back to base," he shouted over the radio. The Luftwaffe, long accustomed to dictating the tempo of aerial combat over its own territory, now struggled to comprehend the impossible. How these enemy fighters had flown clear across Germany without refueling. In the following days, German pilots whispered among themselves in disbelief about the new American fighter. The Mustang wasn't just faster, it was the first Allied fighter equipped with long-range drop tanks, and its Merlin engine, built under British license, gave it exceptional high-altitude performance. What began as a simple escort mission became a turning point in the air war. For the first time, American bombers could cross Germany with constant protection, from takeoff to return. That day, the skies over Europe changed forever. The Luftwaffe began losing, not just aircraft, but control of the air itself. And across German radar screens and observation towers, one phrase was repeated with awe and fear: the turning point in the skies. The Luftwaffe's shock. The following day, chaos filled the Luftwaffe hangars. At bases like Farneusen and Jüterbog, pilots and mechanics argued in tense voices, trying to make sense of what had happened. None of the reports matched. The Americans had flown nearly 1,000 kilometers into German territory, and still had fuel left to fight and return home. Oberst Adolf Garland, one of the Luftwaffe's most respected commanders, studied maps and reports detailing the performance of the new Allied fighter. Around him, engineers scribbled frantic calculations, trying to estimate the P-51's range. None of the numbers seemed possible. "If it's true," Garland said quietly, then the war in the air is over for us. Meanwhile, across the channel, pilots of the 35th 7th Fighter Group celebrated in silence. This wasn't just a victory, it was a revolution. The P-51 Mustang had proven to be the first fighter capable of escorting bombers all the way to Berlin and back. The secret lay in its engineering. With drop tanks and the Packard Merlin engine, a licensed American-built version of the British Rolls-Royce Merlin, the Mustang achieved a range of over 1,600 miles, 2,600 kilometers. It flew high, fast, and burned less fuel than any fighter of its era. In the missions that followed, air superiority began to shift. Now, when American bombers appeared on German radar, they were no longer alone. They came surrounded by dozens of Mustangs, and that changed everything. The Luftwaffe's hunters, once free to attack helpless bomber formations, now met fierce resistance. They weren't the same missions anymore. Recalled German pilot Franz Stiegler years later. They had a fighter that could be everywhere at once. Over Leipzig, Major Don Gentle of the 4th Fighter Group dove at incredible speed onto a formation of V-190s. The wind screamed against the metal, a thunder in the cold air. Within seconds, one German plane fell, then another. Gentle shouted into his radio, "These Mustangs are changing the game." As the battles intensified, Allied intelligence confirmed the results. In just 3 months, Luftwaffe losses had skyrocketed. Aircraft factories couldn't replace the destroyed planes fast enough. Veteran pilots were dying, and inexperienced recruits were being rushed into combat, many without completing training. For the Germans, the nightmare wasn't just the Mustang's speed, it was its omnipresence. It could appear anywhere, anytime. A Luftwaffe squadron radio log captured a desperate call during an interception mission. "They're following us all the way back to our bases." How is that possible? In Berlin, Luftwaffe officers examined the wreckage of a downed Mustang amid the twisted metal. They discovered the external fuel tank system, and finally understood the secret. "They're not crossing Germany without refueling," said an engineer. "They're carrying their fuel with them." It was a simple concept, but devastating in effect. With it, the Allies had conquered not just distance, but the fear of entering the Reich's heartland. The Luftwaffe, once the symbol of German power, was crumbling, and the deep, unmistakable growl of the Merlin engine over the skies of Europe became for many Germans the sound of inevitable defeat. The dominion of the skies, the age of the Mustangs. Spring 1944. The skies over Europe no longer belonged to the Luftwaffe. With each new mission, the deep growl of the Merlin engines announced a new reality: Allied air supremacy. The P-51 Mustang had become the symbol of reach, endurance, and American engineering genius. At air bases across England, entire rows of Mustangs waited under the morning fog. Pilots drank coffee, studied maps, and knew one truth: they could now go anywhere and come back. Captain John C. Meyer of the 52nd Fighter Group watched as the B-17 bombers roared down the runway. Behind them, dozens of Mustangs rose into the mist like hunting falcons. "They're not alone this time," he said over the radio. The mission was daring: escort the bombers deep into Leipzig, the industrial heart of Germany, destroy the factories, and return without a single stop. Before the Mustang, such a mission was impossible. With it, it became routine. On the other side of the front, German radar screens lit up. "They're back," a radio operator muttered. The disbelief that once filled the Luftwaffe had turned into resignation. German pilots now knew the truth: the enemy could fight them on equal range and superior performance. The V-90s and Bf-109s, once dominant, were now aging relics in the face of a new generation of aircraft. Factories raced to produce improved variants, but time and fuel were running out. Many fighters barely managed to take off. Others were destroyed before even leaving the ground. Over Magdeburg, a squadron of Mustangs dived from above the clouds, The sunlight shimmered across their silver wings, and the German pilots, caught by surprise, scrambled to react. But the Mustang had a deadly secret. Its dive speed. It could drop like a spear, strike and climb again before the enemy even had time to aim. Major James H. Howard, one of the aces of the 351st Fighter Group, would later recall they thought we had fuel for 15 minutes. We stayed over Germany for more than 2 hours. For the Germans, the air war was becoming unsustainable. The Luftwaffe could no longer protect even Berlin itself. Civilians began to recognize the distinct roar of the Mustang's Merlin engine, a sound that for many became the prelude to the bombing. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, American newspapers celebrated the feat. The Mustang was hailed as the plane that won the skies. Photos of smiling pilots beside their sleek fighters filled the front pages. But behind those smiles lay exhaustion, fear, and the grim understanding that victory would still cost thousands of lives. In June 1944, during Operation Overlord, the Mustangs played a decisive role, clearing the skies for the D-Day landings in Normandy. They strafed rail lines, convoys, and defensive positions, paving the way for the Allied invasion. A captured German pilot later confessed during interrogation. It was the end of the Luftwaffe's reign. The skies that had once been Germany's pride now belonged to the Allies, and it had all begun the moment an American plane, sleek, silver, and unstoppable, crossed all of Germany without refueling. The legacy of the Mustang, the fighter that changed the war. Summer 1944, the deep rumble of the Merlin engine now echoed across Europe. The skies, once ruled by the fear of German fighters, had become Allied territory. The P-51 Mustang was no longer just an airplane. It was a symbol of change, a strategic weapon that altered the course of the war. On every mission, the Mustang proved its worth. It could fly higher, faster, and farther than any fighter the Luftwaffe could muster. Its constant presence beside the B-17 Flying Fortress and B-24 Liberator bombers gave Allied crews the confidence they had lacked since 1942. At American bases in England, pilots returned from long missions with soot-covered wings and exhaustion etched into their faces. But alive, before the Mustang, few crews ever made it back from Berlin. Now, hundreds did. General James Doolittle, commander of the 8th Air Force, wrote in his report, "The P-51 is the weapon that gave us the sky." Meanwhile, in the United States, Packard engine factories worked around the clock. The demand for Mustangs was so high that North American aviation produced nearly 500 aircraft per month. Each one represented a leap in technology and confidence, a fighter that could cross all of Europe and return without ever touching enemy soil. But the Mustang's impact went beyond technology. It was psychological. German pilots, once the masters of the sky, now flew in fear. The sound of the Mustang was the sound of death. A former Luftwaffe pilot would say years later. By 1945, as Allied forces advanced across Germany, Mustangs flew in tight formations over ruined cities, shepherding the skies like silent sentinels. They escorted bombers on the final missions and intercepted the last desperate German Mi-26 jet fighters, the fading echoes of a crumbling air force. When the war ended, the numbers spoke for themselves. Over 4,950 enemy aircraft destroyed by P-51s, the lowest bomber loss rates in any air campaign. The first Allied fighter capable of total air dominance over the Reich. When Europe's skies finally fell silent in May 1945, the hum of the Merlin engine faded, but its legend was secured forever. Decades later, historians would still call the Mustang the fighter that won the war in Europe. And in the memories of pilots, both Allied and German, there remained a mix of fear and respect. Respect for a machine that had transcended its design. The P-51 Mustang was not merely a weapon. It was a promise fulfilled, proof that the impossible could be conquered with ingenuity, courage, and determination. And when the engines finally went silent over Germany, The world knew one truth. The sky at last belonged to freedom.
Thank you for watching this incredible, true story. If this moment of humanity in the middle of war moved you, make sure to leave a like and share this video with someone who loves history. And if you don't want to miss the next untold story of World War II, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and join us on this journey through the past. Because here, every story reminds us of what it truly means to be human, even in times of war.